Okay, thank you to everybody that stayed and to all the new people that have come. Look, again, it's really fantastic to see so many people willingly turning up to these things, and it's great that there's so much interest in what we've been doing lately. Most of the content, my name is Matt Miles, by the way, for those who don't know me. I'm the Principal Advisor for Environmental Information in the Science branch and the Environmental Science unit of that branch. Most of the content that we go through today will assume some prior knowledge of BDBSA, so we're kind of assuming that people know or have some experience. However, I will start with a bit of an overview for some of those that haven't got quite as deep a knowledge. We are making a video of this that we'll make available as well for people who can't be here today, or if you want to revisit any of this stuff. Look, we're a small team supported by our fabulous IT people in the Science and Information group. And we aim to look after one of, if not the major asset that JUNA has to understand the biodiversity of South Australia. Without the biological databases of SA, JUNA would find it very hard to do a lot of the things that it does. This is a central place where we've been storing biological data since the biological survey days of the 80s and 90s, and it really is a key asset to the agency, and we work on it on a daily basis and try and keep it up to speed. It doesn't get a lot of investment. We're working on improving the profile, making sure people understand its functionality better and better. So it's great to see so many people here who are interested in where it's at these days. So just a bit of a brief outline. I'm just going to talk a bit of an overview about BDBSA and how it works and where it sits in the work of JUNA. And then Helen and Felicity will take over and go through some of these detailed topics that we've been talking about. We can capture any other comments that come through as we're going around, but we've tried to include all of the comments that people put back into the Eventbrite invite. We asked you for issues that you were interested in. We think that most of those have been addressed in what we're going to cover today. If there are any outstanding, pipe up with questions at the end, or we can certainly cover those at another time. So just briefly, for those who were at the last session, this BDBSA training is really a detailed expansion of the section in the storage guidelines that looks at BDBSA. So in the storage guidelines, you'll find a number of links to the information that's presented here. But we're really looking at BDBSA, which is a corporate structured database. We have many databases, obviously, in the agency. Some of them are corporately promoted and managed, and some are not corporately managed and promoted, USB sticks and things like that. Some of them are structured and some of them are unstructured. The unstructured is where we've just got these little drives, the S drive and the R drive. There's all sorts of data in there that is stored and managed in an unstructured way. But we have a number of structured databases, things like Hydra and SAGeo data, and particularly BDBSA, obviously, for our biological data. And those kinds of systems really provide the backbone for JUNA. A secure environment, ongoing management and validation, they're transparent, and they really provide that accessibility through other systems that we have as well, like our web accessible portals. So the way that it works, there's three major functions that it supports. You've got to get the data in. Once it's in there, you need to manage it and curate it. And then there's access. How do you get the data out? And all of this stuff, a lot of these things are linked off the environment website. So this is the external website. This is publicly available information. There's two sections under there, and I will visit these, BDBSA and information sharing. They're under topics, science, information and data. Ooh. Safari again. Okay, so this is the new website. If you've not seen it, in a crazy resolution. Topics, science, and then under that we've got information and data. And this is where we live. Biological databases of SA, the Biosurvey, there's all sorts of good stuff in here. If I can scoot across, which I can't, there's some information there about biological databases and information sharing. If you imagine what's written here, that's got more information about taxonomy and methodologies. You can see all those links there. So there's all sorts of good stuff in there. Please make use of that at your leisure. So, input, management, curation, access. In terms of, don't expect you to read all of this, but if we consider that there are a number of different data types that of biological data that we have, there's a whole stack of capture tools that have been developed over the years. There's a number of different software platforms that these things exist on, are collected through. There's a number of different repositories. Some of them are approved and some of them are not approved. When by approved, I mean they are managed by other institutions that we have a relationship with, and we can vouch for the quality of the curation of the data that's sitting in those systems as well. And then we've got a whole stack of different delivery tools. So you can see that it's quite a complicated area. You know, the different data types from reptiles to invertebrates, marine fish, ferals. We've got photo points and images, different formats of data as well. Everybody thinks that their data is special and that their project has never been collected before in the way that they want to collect it. I think that's a fallacy. Sometimes there is new stuff that comes online in different projects, but it's really important to recognise that, you know, Juna's been doing this stuff for 40 years or more, and we've had this system built that captures pretty well everything. As I say, occasionally new things come along, but we do try and keep it up to date, and it's certainly the place for authoritative information, particularly about taxonomy, and certainly historical records all the way back to you know, records of Sturt's flora collection that sits in the herbarium, that is available through their system as well, that sits in the herbarium. So we've got different capture tools, again, tools that have been sprung up for different reasons and different projects. We've got data return templates up there, we've got Ramble surveys, we've got Bushrat, which is a different methodology, KI Opportune database, which has sprung up, BAT surveys, EP, Goanna web forms, Birds SA are in there. We've got all these externally managed tools as well that various parts of the agency have different engagement with, whether it's Fluker posts or citizen science projects. And people come to that and the data management around that from their experience and what's new. We know that technology moves, you know, really quickly these days, and there's always a new tool on the block. We used to maybe dream of there being one place where, you know, one tool where everybody would be able to put everything in. It's not going to happen. We've been waiting for a long time, and it's really difficult. There's such big overheads, and it doesn't allow for that flexibility when new technology comes along. So we just have to live with the fact that these are quite complex constellations of data and systems that we need to deal with. So here's an example of the data flow really for the SAMDB's bird data portal. So we've got birds as the data type. This is the custom ALA portal that's been created for that. The software platform is BioCollect in ALA. and the approved repository is BDBSA. So that data comes back into BDBSA, and once it's back into BDBSA, then we can deliver it. It gets delivered out through all of these different tools. Some of them via ALA, GBIF and others, then there's our Juna access portals as well, such as Nature Maps. So it's important to recognise then that within all of that complexity, we need to manage BDBSA in the best way that we can, and we need to make it available for people and as responsive as we can. We're not as responsive as we might like to be to all projects, but we certainly know that there's such a rich content and a well-defined set of tables, hundreds of tables that are sitting in BDBSA, that really will collect and store pretty well everything that you can think of in terms of biologically related information. So here is a MEC chart from the MEC templates that describes how we get data into BDBSA. Talks about the fact that early on we need to register a project, and then obviously you need to collect the data. And then that little blue icon is the field data being collected, and then that gets validated through your project. You know, you bring it back into the office or at night, and you validate that. You make sure all the records are correct, and then it goes into a table, some kind of, it might be a spreadsheet, something that's comfortable and portable with your project. But at that point, it's still just working data. It's the working collected information. Once that's been validated, then we've got a file and it's validated field data. So you wouldn't make necessarily this stuff available to many people. You might archive that if you have to go back to it, if there's something that you need to look at. But this is the file that really you kick off from there. Once you've got that, then to actually get it into BDBSA, it's got to be transformed and be in the right format. And this is the native format of BDBSA. It's kind of a three-tiered structure where you've got site, visit, and species. And there's informational attributes associated with the site, attributes associated with the visit, like your dates and who was there. And then you've got your species information that you're actually observing. And that's what BDBSA runs on. That's the structure of the database. Over time, we've recognised that a simple version of that has been valuable. And this is really the minimum data set is in here. So some people can work here if they're in a really complex kind of project. A lot of people choose to just work with the simple minimum data set. So once you've got your field collected data, you can either put it into this template or this template. If it does go into this template, there's a process to actually turn it into this, but that can be done in a supported way. Then that goes into our test version of BDBSA, and there's a little bit of a feedback loop here to make sure that as that load goes in, that gets validated for all the checks and balances inside the data definitions inside BDBSA. Once that data has been cleaned up and you come through that successfully, then you're into BDBSA prod. So there is an effort to get it in there. This is different to having one of these. You might be out in the field. If you are just a researcher or you're doing your project with your blinkers on, this is my project, this is what I'm doing, I've collected my data, I've put it into my spreadsheet, I know what these columns are, there we go, I've got it. That's all well and good. You might just stop there, but it's unshareable. You can't, it doesn't go into the system until you put this little bit of extra effort in and make it go into there. And we have people who help in our teams. We have consultants and volunteers who come in and help to do this process. So there's certainly resources around, but what's important is that at the beginning of your project, you just plan for that step to happen and you make sure that there are resources in your project for that bit to occur. Otherwise, it's not going to get in here. We do have a holding bay. We have a bottom drawer where people send us these things. And if we don't have the resources to put them in, or they haven't forecast for those resources, we can put it inside the in the bottom drawer. and it'll go in one day when we've got some time and resources. At the very least, if that happens and you've registered the project up here, then we know that that data exists in the bottom drawer, and someone says, oh, you know, we've got some such and such data that's not in BDBSA, but it's down here. If someone's asking for that kind of data, then we can pull that out. So it's kind of a manual way of keeping track of that. So main message there is put some resources aside to make sure that that step can happen in a timely fashion, and you'll get the best way of communicating your data out this end here. So what happens to it once it's in there? One of the major, so obviously consistent formatting, we've been through that. Consistent taxonomy, really important. The handling of nomenclature is a big service that we provide. We're constantly linked to the herbarium and the museum in terms of the authorities for taxonomy in South Australia, and also at the national level. And we have people who are making sure that species get lumped or split or renamed as is needed. And if the data's gone in the right format, then those names get assigned automatically to the right records. We also perform validation checks. So on the way into the database as well, we make sure that the spatial locations of records are in the right place for where the project was, and we try and minimise those kinds of errors. And again, making discoverable and accessible, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. Project metadata being a key one here. Now let's see if this one works. There you go. So on the web, you'll find this list of all of the projects that are in BDBSA. So as I say, if you register your project, this is where it will come up, and people will be able to see. I think we're over the 1,000 mark now. Is that right? Yep. We go all the way down. Freshwater fish, gropers, seagrass, blah blah blah. Look at that. Fantastic stuff. So there's a one-liner there telling you what the title of the project is. And then if you hit one of these, let's go to Frogwatch. Takes you to more information about that particular project. So there's an abstract, time, what the objectives were, what the methodologies were, and you can see what kind of data has been collected in that particular project. So even if the data does end up in our bottom drawer, it's accessible through searching of that particular listing. And that comes straight out of the Oracle table. So as soon as you've registered your project, it will be appear on that particular place there.
So if we send you something to go in the bottom drawer, but it hasn't been registered,
that doesn't work. No, it has to register.
Okay, that was the question.
We'll prompt you to register.
Yeah.
Strongly suggest.
Okay.
Having said that, we have a little backlog of miscellaneous data sets that you know, we have to guess the metadata about and try to set up a project. Much better new to it.
That's right. Someone who knows what's happened. Okay, so this is now the next step is where. So we had all that previous chart that got the data into BDBSA prod, and now this is looking at the data access out of prod. It's classified for official use only, meaning that the data that's in there is not denatured, not obfuscated. It's not. It's in its raw and accurate formats. So if there's any sensitivities, those sensitivities are not masked in any way at that level. It sits in a series of Oracle tables, and they can be accessed live through an Oracle Forms interface, or indeed through other ODBC drivers via Microsoft Access and other methods. So that's one way that you can look at the data that's in there live into the Oracle tables. You do need to set that up, set access up for your particular login and we can provide some training as well if you want to understand the detail and the depths that you can go to there. We also have survey projects that get drawn out of PROD and delivered to, first of all, ECOS. So ECOS, which is a Turn facility at Adelaide Uni, they have a web portal which is got a very rich description of the metadata all the way down to the record level that's put out through that system. So you can search based on the quality of the records or the types of taxa that have been recorded, or whether it's a long-term monitoring program, or whether there's photos. You can filter on those kinds of things. So our survey projects go out through there. They get pushed out on a regular basis. Then, of course, there's publications where users have extracted and made use of that information through the survey. So that's more of a manual method. We also push out to the flora and fauna super tables into Aegis. Aegis stands for Environmental GIS, which is the GIS stack or server in Juno. Again, this is classified FOUO, so this is still, if there's sensitive data, there's still sensitivities in there. And that is in our ArcSDE environment, and that comes out in a number of ways. You can look at that through your ArcGIS interface and ArcMap, so you can customise the searches and the results that you get from there. Straight up data requests, we get people sending us an email to the biodata requests email, and we'll do some filtering and provide information, whether that's EBS or consultants or other members of the public, or even internally who want to get certain filters out. And also ENV Maps. So ENV Maps is the internal, who knows about ENV Maps? Who does not know about ENV Maps is probably the better question. Okay, there's a couple. ENV Maps is a web mapping application on StateNet, internal to Juno. It's an ArcGIS web mapping interface, and the flora and fauna super tables, unfettered, go out through ENV Maps. And there's a whole stack of other spatial layers that you can access through that as well. And then thirdly, or is it fourthly, the flora and fauna super tables go out publicly as well. So this is a different version. These are classified as public, so these have been desensitised. If there's any sensitive records in there, then they are either withheld from publication through that avenue, or they are generalised to 0.1 of a decimal in terms of their location. So we have a sensitive data register. Not sure, do we go through that a bit later? Not sure if we've got that in here. Sensitive data register, where you can register for environmental sensitivity of any particular records, and those will be desensitised before going out there. So that's the publicly available one, and you can see that on Nature Maps, our publicly available web mapping tool. It also goes quarterly to the Atlas of Living Australia, which is another fantastic resource. Who does not know about Atlas of Living Australia? Everyone knows about it.
Wow.
Amazing. Lots of really good tools in there, incredible data that's federated from right across the country, right across the continent. And they deliver once a year to the global biodiversity information framework as well. So you can see that by registering a project and getting your data into BDBSA, it's going to make its way all the way out to being globally available through some pretty fantastic tools for researchers around the world, should they wish to access that. Here you go. Data access sensitivity. So, I'll show you the sensitive data register in a moment. There is a nomination form. There's a stack of things on there at the moment. Things like sea eagle nests, or threatened species, where the publication of precise locations of these things is going to be a threat to that particular species one way or another. People from time to time come up with new ones. They think that maybe we should be restricting certain information. What we do is we have a nomination form that you can fill out, which is fine, and then we consider who's the best people to look at that particular taxa in the agency, and then we have a discussion with you about whether the issues that you've raised are valid or not. Our intent is to be, by default, for information to not be sensitive, not be sensitised. So it is important to look at the rationale of why something gets nominated, and then go through the process of working out whether that's just whether it's an unfounded fear or whether it's a real issue. And when you get a few heads in the room, it's really good to have that debate and work it out. So if we, at the end of the day, decide, yep, we think that should be marked as sensitive data, then that's how it will be treated throughout all of the delivery mechanisms in Genus. So whether it comes out through a data request or it comes out through this public classification here, depending on who it's going to and what the reason is, if it's got a sensitivity flag at that end, then that will be maintained through whichever delivery mechanism. And there's different levels of sensitivities. We can either withhold data at the entire project level or just at a species level or at a record level in terms of denaturing those coordinates. This is all outlined in the MEC sensitive data handling workflow. So with the sensitive data handling workflow, we mentioned it previously. There's different types of environmental sensitivity, whether it is a threat to the species itself. We also have the restricted access through publishing embargoes. That's dealt with there, and so is Aboriginal cultural information is also dealt with there in terms of how to handle that appropriately. So let's see if this works.
Hello, my name is Dr. Judy Benign. I'm an oncologist at NYU School of Medicine.
Hello, Dr. Judy Benign.
I read your article on B-cell function. I think that I could use the data for my work on pancreatic cancer.
I am not an oncologist.
I know, but I think I could use the data for my work on pancreatic cancer. Do you have the data?
Everything you need to know is in the article.
No. What I need is the data. Will you share your data?
I am not sure that will be possible.
But your work is in PubMed Central and was funded by NIH.
That is true.
And it was published in Science, which requires that you share your data.
I did publish in Science.
Then I am requesting your data. Can I have a copy of your data?
I am not sure where my data is.
But surely you saved your data.
I did. I saved it on a USB drive.
Where is the USB drive?
It is in a box. It is in a box at home. I just moved.
But can I use your data?
There are many boxes. So many boxes. I forgot to label the boxes.
Hello again. Thank you for sending me a copy of your data on a USB drive. I received the envelope yesterday.
You are welcome, but I will need that back when you are finished. That is my only copy.
I did have a question.
What is your question? You might find the answer in my article.
No. I received the data, but when I opened it up, it was in hexadecimal.
Yes, that is right.
I cannot read hexadecimal.
You asked for my data and I gave it to you. I have done what you asked.
But is there a way to read the hexadecimal?
You will need the program that created the hexadecimal file.
Yes, I will. What is the name of the program?
Cytosyn.
I do not know this program.
It was a very good program. The company that made the program went bankrupt in 2007.
Do you have a copy of the program?
I do not use this program anymore because the company that made it went bankrupt. Maybe you could buy a copy on eBay.
I have good news.
You again.
I talked to my colleague. She knew a person with a copy of the software.
Then why do you need me? Everything you need to know about the data is in the article.
I opened the data and I could not understand it.
If you have the program, you will find it is clear.
Well, I noticed that you called your data fields SAM. Is that an abbreviation?
Yes, it is an abbreviation of my co-author's name. His name is Samuel Lee. We call him Sam.
I see. And what is the content of the field called SAM1?
Ah, yes. SAM1 is the level of CXCR4 expression.
And what is the content of the field called SAM2?
That is logical if you think about it.
What is the content of the field called SAM2?
I don't remember.
Is there a guide to the data anywhere?
Yes, of course. It is the article that is published in Science.
The article does not tell me what the field names mean. Is there any record of what these field names mean?
Yes. My co-author knows what the content of SAM2 is and SAM3. And SAM4.
Can I talk to your co-author?
I'm not sure.
I would very much like to talk to your co-author.
Well, he was a graduate student. He went back to China 2 years ago.
Can I have his contact information?
He is in China. His name is Sam Lee.
I think I cannot use your data.
You could check the article to see if what you need is there.
Please stop talking now.
All right. Fantastic little expose of why we need to manage our data. Pretty obvious, but that's why we've got something like BDBSA, which does a great job of all those